And hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Flyers Files on BFA Sports. I'm Kevin Durso, your host, and we got a lot to catch up on. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody where you can find me, where you can find all the other shows that we have with BFA Sports. So I am at Kevin_Durso. Everywhere you can follow me. So Twitter X platform, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. That's the handle for me. And obviously follow along with BFA Live Sports as well, and live stream and keep up to date on not just this show, but all of the shows that we have going on, whether it's Phillies Talk, Sixers Talk, Nernshaw Radio, all of those. So just keep in mind that you can find a bunch of different shows in a bunch of different places, and in one, or all in one place, I should say, and keep it locked in, because we're building something and we're trying to get as much attention on it as possible. So let's get into everything when it comes to the Flyers over the last handful of weeks. And my apologies for having to skip a week of doing this. There was a lot going on the home front, a lot going on health-wise, mildly, but still had to take care of some things. So we're back to discuss some more. And really, I guess the place to begin, we're going to do the week in review first, but there is also a big piece of news that came out on Wednesday morning that kind of shapes the way the rest of this Flyer season is going to look. So we'll start with the week in review first and then build to that piece of news. And the Flyers, pretty successful week all in all. They don't have a good record kind of to show for it, but they don't take a loss in regulation either. So 1-0-3 over the last 4 games, which, again, it's 1 win, 3 losses. It doesn't sound great, but they play 3 really competitive games against tough competition. Vegas, 2 against Carolina. The 2 against Carolina go to shootouts. You kind of know the drill when it comes to that you know that you're getting, you're in games like that where it's a coin flip. It could go either way. You might win a shootout. The Flyers have been really successful at shootouts all season. And this just happened to be the weekend that it doesn't go their way this time. They don't get the extra point. They don't have, Trevor Zegras doesn't score for the first time in the shootout, both games against Carolina. The Flyers aren't able to manufacture a goal. Sam Ersson loses a shootout for the first time this year. And in both cases, both goalies only allow 1 goal, but that's enough to make the difference and cost the Flyers an opportunity and a win. But nonetheless, you get the point out of it, you maintain pace, and then they get a nice convincing 4-1 win over Montreal on Tuesday night to kind of still establish their position in the standings, to kind of bounce back from all of that. It sounds worse. I mean, when you start to talk about, if you don't want to sugarcoat it, if you want to just look at it for what it is, overtime loss against Vegas, shootout losses against Carolina both nights, it's a 3-game losing streak. You don't want to have to talk about it, as kind of, walking around what it really is, right? Like, yeah, they get points for all of those games, but they didn't win the game. They didn't prove to be better than the team on the other side on that particular night. So it still comes into play that you're not quite getting the result that you're looking for. And it's a way to kind of mask that, it masks it both ways. On one hand, you can talk about it being progress. You're still gaining points. Your points percentage is good. On the other hand, you're not winning. And that, winning those games versus losing those games could be what defines you as a true contender over being a team that's just kind of hanging in there, smoke and mirrors, that kind of thing. So we'll certainly get into that, because the Flyers standings position is going to definitely come up as we go through this and kind of talk about where this could go. I'm kind of, without jumping ahead and without blending this together with the look ahead at the end of the show, where we kind of start to look towards the next handful of games that are coming up, I'm going to blend those two conversations together, because to me, and I wrote about this in my Flyers Files column on 97.3 ESPN.com, that there is, these next handful of games, and the Montreal game was included. I wrote it ahead of that game. But Montreal, the games that are ahead leading into the holiday break, and even the handful that come out of the holiday break that close out the month of December, there is some runway available to really solidify a position. And we'll have to see if the Flyers are able to do that, but they have themselves positioned pretty well. And it kind of comes down to more about these but more about the possibility of whether or not they can maintain some consistency. We know the players they have right now. We know the holes they are trying to fill, whether that's guys that they don't have within the organization or guys that they do have in the organization that just, are not going to be available. And that kind of is going to be a good segue to get us into our first big topic of the show, which is Tyson Foerster. And it was unfortunate, last show 2 weeks ago, I was talking about Foerster's injury, and obviously we had a timeline presented then about Tyson Foerster's injury, 2 to 3 months. That's pretty significant, but you kind of also kept it in the back of your mind. Okay, it was December 1st that this happened. They've determined it's a 2 to 3 month timeline. 2 months from now takes you into the beginning of February, and the Flyers play 2 games that first week, and then everything stops. The Olympic break hits. They won't play again until the end of the month, and you kind of figured maybe that's the window. You get through the Olympics, Foerster's ready to come back. It's kind of like a trade deadline acquisition in a way, because the trade deadline's very close to that date. You get him back for the end of February, maybe the beginning of March. You've got a month and a half to go, and he's available, and he's been one of your best players all season. Then came the news this morning. Foerster now had to have surgery, was completed 2 days ago on Monday, and he's out for 5 months and virtually the rest of the season at that point. I know that technically we can talk about regular season versus playoffs, that maybe if the team made the playoffs, maybe if they had some success in the playoffs, he could be available at some point. I just don't like looking that far ahead. Not only do I not like looking that far ahead, I think it's unrealistic for those expectations to be set that it's even a possibility. Making the playoffs isn't even really a full-on expectation of this team and this roster, and you just took one of the better players off of it for the rest of the regular season. And I don't think that's changing. I don't think you're going to see Foerster somehow magically be good to go in April and the team have 7 games left, I think it is, when April rolls around, to try to maybe squeeze into the playoffs or figure that situation out. I don't think that's even part of the equation. I think the earliest you are possibly hearing about Foerster is during the first round of a playoff series, if that even happens. So to me, this is an out for the season timeline that will take us to 2026, 27. And that's why I think that's why the team kind of leans into, he'll make a full recovery. It is a 5-month timeline, but you really know what you're getting at this point. You're getting, we'll have to see Foerster again in training camp next year. And again, I'm going to bring up his stats for the year. This was at the time of the injury, obviously. So he plays in only 21 games, and he had missed time earlier as well, but he was off to a really great start this season. 10 goals, 13 points. And the point total actually was probably, I don't want to say it was down, but he obviously was more of a goal scorer than a guy setting up and getting assists, but 10 goals was going to take him far. I mean, for sure, a pace of 30 this season, possibly able to challenge for 35 to 40 if he could really get hot and have a streak going or anything like that. And now essentially the season is over. So those are his numbers for the season. And that it's a shame, because for as good of a goal scorer as he's been, as good as Foerster's been being able to score goals for this team, he's just been a joy to watch because he does just about everything well. He plays in all situations. He's good on the forecheck. He's got some physicality to his game. He wins puck battles. He's able to maintain possession and prolong plays. He's out, Rick Tocchet kind of talked about this. He's out there in the last minute of the game. He's probably one of the first 2 out there among forwards to kill a penalty. He's big on the power play. He's part of every aspect that this team plays. And that's kind of what makes it hard to, you don't replace that guy. You don't have a player in your organization right now that is that all skill set, but not really much of a penalty killer, and not going to be the guy that you tap on the shoulder potentially in the final minute and say, listen, I need somebody to go out there, block a shot, win a battle along the boards, take away possession. That's what they're going to Foerster for. So replacing him is not easy, and we kind of can go down the rundown of different guys they've tried so far. They gave Nikita Grabenkin a shot, and everybody wanted to see it. Grabenkin was getting, one game in, 3 off sometimes, maybe longer. So there was this big kind of displeasure voiced from the fan base on social media. Play this guy. We need to see what he is. He deserves bigger minutes. He doesn't deserve to be just a fourth liner. He doesn't deserve to be a healthy scratch. He's got to play. Well, now he got the chance to play. And over the 6 games, it wasn't working out. And that doesn't mean that his NHL career is over, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a fit on the roster currently or anything like that, but you start to wonder. And when the Flyers made a decision when Foerster was out and had to replace the roster spot, they brought up Carl Grundstrom, and then they gave Grundstrom a shot to get into some games. He's playing on the fourth line. He's making an impact on the fourth line. They elevate him. He makes an impact again, scores another goal. And all of a sudden, you're looking at a guy who has 3 goals, 4 points in 6 games since, and all of this is really since the call-up. That makes you think. I'm not sitting here telling you Carl Grundstrom is a permanent top 9 solution, but he's also not incapable of playing in a top 9 role for a handful of games if that's what you want to experiment with. Now, that being said, you're not really going to experiment anymore. This isn't about, hey, for 2 months, we've got to figure out how to get through Tyson Foerster's injury, but he'll be back. Now he's probably not coming back. So it really, to me, opens the door for a prospect like Alex Bump, that you have a player who could naturally slot in to not only just to that role, he could play power play for you. You'd have to see if he fits into your penalty kill rotation, an all situation kind of guy, but it would be worth a shot to get. Similarly, this is your chance to see Bump at the NHL level, to see if he's ready, to see if he takes to it better than others do sometimes when you get called up, everything like that. And I think that it's a matter of when, not if, for Bump. It's going to happen at some point this year. It's just a matter of how long they want to kind of try to make this work with Grundstrom in a top 9 role. Do they see him as a fit for, however long? There's a decent chance that, given that they only have 1 home game left, both in the month and before the holidays, that you're just trying to get through the next 4 games. You play Thursday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, and then the holiday break hits. Maybe that's all you're trying to focus on for the time being, is Grundstrom can play the next 4 games. He's got some jump. His legs are good. He's got speed. Let's try that. And I don't know whether you say after the holiday break, after the new year, once the team returns home and has some more extended time on home ice again, maybe that's when you give Bump a shot. So I look to a couple of things. I look to whether it's that first game, the Sunday after Christmas, where it's the 28th and you're about to head on the West Coast for a week. Maybe that's the time to do it. Maybe the time to do it is January 6th when you face Anaheim at home to start a 4-game homestand. Maybe that's the time. Maybe it's later than that and we just don't know it. And that's the team, management's idea of properly developing him, and not only properly developing him, but determining whether or not he's ready. Maybe they just don't feel comfortable yet. So that is the scenarios that I can see at this point. You have Grabenkin, you have Grundstrom both on the roster. You can rotate them in. You can have both of them play and pull Nick Delorier out of the lineup. You have all sorts of options for how to utilize those 2 so far. But if you sense that you need a player who's more equipped to handle the role that Foerster already plays and try to get as close to it as possible, you might try to go to a prospect like Bump and see if he doesn't run with an opportunity to be part of the lineup going forward permanently. That would be the ideal situation to me. So that's where I lean with that conversation. So I want to shift gears to Matvei Michkov. And part of the reason I want to do this is because Michkov is a topic every day on Flyers Twitter and social media and all that. It constantly comes up. There's accounts out there that are doing nothing but watching his minutes and usage. And certainly I get it when an overtime comes and you don't see much of Michkov, 1 shift or not at all. I understand that. I can understand on a power play not liking who he's playing with potentially. I can understand that. Those are the decisions that I think can be critiqued a lot more heavily. But overall ice time in the game, I think, is deceiving when it comes to Michkov because, one, I'm watching a guy who takes penalties pretty regularly. And if he's taking penalties and he ends up in the penalty box and he has to sit for 2 minutes, and the goal is to sit for 2 minutes because your team would have killed it off, he's not going to get much ice time, both possibly on merit because you just took a penalty that the team doesn't want you to take, but also you just lost 2 minutes of potential ice time right there that could have been part of 5-on-5. So now you have to wait your turn in the rotation again. There's always sorts of questions with this. Is Tocchet handling this the right way? Is this more of a Michkov problem? Is it one of the questions I have, is it really that big of a deal? We're talking about a 20 to 21-year-old player that is still not a finished product, that admittedly was hard on himself for the way that he started the year and the offseason that he had. And you're waiting for it to come around. It's a lot harder to adjust in season to something like that, to finally figuring it out. And I think that, listen, you can question what Rick Tocchet's doing kind of on the specialty play. I don't think Rick Tocchet's doing anything wrong with 5-on-5. He's not a standout right now. He's not demanding that you put him out there on the ice. And I don't mean like verbally demanding, like put me out there. His play does not indicate that that's a player who's dictating, or who's needing more ice time. If he's taking over a game, you're going to play him. If he's kind of pedestrian, you're not. Simple as that. So I don't think they're overthinking this. I don't think that there's a mishandling going on here. I just think it comes down to not as much power play time and taking penalties that may take you off the ice to take your team out of 5-on-5. It's all part of the equation. How much of this is on Michkov? Going back to, and I understand that now, as it gets further along, we're now over 2 months into the regular season. Michkov has talked about being out of shape and not conditioning or not training the way he typically would have or anything like that. And I just wonder if, even though that kind of feels like it should wear off over time, that you should, as you keep playing games, even with limited minutes, getting a feel for where you're supposed to be at, adjusting to the speed again, having the conditioning, having the strength, all of the above. Not only is it not that simple, I just think that you have a play. Like, I don't see this player in particular having an issue with his ice time unless he's just acting really well. Because he seems like he's having fun on the bench with his teammates. He seems like he's doing all of the things that he wants, he feels the coaching staff wants him to do. He's not in disagreement with them. He's owned up to the fact that his offseason wasn't good enough. And I think there's a lot of it that falls on Michkov in this situation, that you're still trying to recover from a mistake that you made in the offseason with how you went about getting yourself ready. And if that is to be the case, if that's the way that this is, especially internally, if that's the way this is viewed, is he didn't come in the right way and owned up to it, we have to adjust now and it's just not quite there yet. That's a lot on the player. And I don't sense that the player is all that disgruntled with Rick Tocchet or feels like he's being robbed of something that he's already earned. I think he doesn't think that at all. The interesting part is, what's disappointing about it is that after Michkov didn't win the Calder, wasn't even a finalist, we felt like this guy's going to be extra motivated then. He's motivated already to prove that he can play a winning style and that he's got the skill to belong in the NHL. And now he's been told, by voters of an award, you weren't one of the top 3 rookies in your rookie year. And he's a competitive guy, and that's going to bode well. And it kind of hasn't. It just hasn't gotten to that level yet. He's had some small stretches where the goals are coming a little bit more often, or the points are. It's just not happened with enough consistency yet. And on one hand, concerning. He had a great rookie year. Now he's having a poor second year. It also happens a lot. Connor Bedard went through this. Bedard did not have nearly the best, as good a year in his second season as he did as a rookie. Now look at his third year. Look what happens when you can make adjustments in the offseason, when you go from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 and see where your game goes. I'm not worried about him. I don't think that the skill is lacking. I don't think that the mind is lacking. I just think the execution has been off because you're kind of recovering. I think the first part of coming in out of shape is you have to recover physically to be able to go out and perform. The second part is then kind of recovering mentally and having your execution be down so that you can do what you want to do with the play. So you've got a player who has a lot of growing to do. I don't think anything changes when it comes to this player and how he's a cornerstone of the franchise going forward. They obviously don't seem willing to move him when a piece like Quinn Hughes is on the move and Michkov isn't on the move because you don't want to do that at 20, 21 years old like they have. That to me is an indicator they're not giving up on this kid, and neither should the fans. And I think that it's overblown, the idea that it's not that it's mishandling, but I think like there's this kind of narrative out there that, oh, that means Tocchet hates Michkov. He doesn't like the younger guys. He's not prepared, willing to develop them the right way. I don't sense that. I don't sense it at all. I do sense that it's a slow grind right now, that you're trying to teach him elements of the game that are not contributing to his offense. That I'll give you. But I'm also not going to give up on a 21-year-old kid and assume that first year with 26 goals and 63 points in 80 games was just some flashy situation that is only going to happen once and the rest of the schedule goes back to normal. I don't think that's the case with him. And I understand why it's such a big thing. And I think people are having a tough time in the fan base adjusting a little bit to the fact that there's more out there on the roster now. It very much felt like in previous, last season in particular, obviously, because that's when Michkov was here. But like, that's the guy the team revolves around, and people are kind of still trying to make it that. But Zegras has been very good, and you have seen growth from other players on the roster. It's not like it's just, wow, they got Zegras, he's been great. They got Dan Vladar in goal, he's been great, and that's the difference so far. That's where these wins are coming from. It's not that simple. But there is an element where it can be developed and where you can give a nod to other players in this picture who are certainly elevating their game enough and producing well enough to help the team still win, even if Michkov is not up to his typical standard. And to be honest, it's still too early to tell, kind of, in a way. I mean, he's pretty darn close. Like if we're close to, a third of the way through the season or something like that, he's pretty darn close to the same pace as his numbers last season. So it's not like it's some lost cause here. And I think that everybody needs to pump the brakes on the idea that Michkov's ice time or what he isn't able to do or anything like that is taking away from what kind of player he's going to be in the long run. I think you've got to have that patience still with him. Enjoy the fact that he's got, depending on the ice situation, but on the roster, certainly some other guys around him, Zegras primarily, that have that creative element that kind of keeps you motivated, can show you what it can become. So all valid things to consider as, we can continue to watch this journey for Michkov. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way that this is going because I don't sense that the player thinks there's anything wrong. And because of that, I think that the Flyers are doing this well only because of that it's centered in such a way and that once the location was kind of, as you start to figure out where everything's going and where you want this team to go, he's at the center of it. Michkov's at the center of it. So you have to keep that in mind as you process that and understand that it's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight with him. So this is kind of more and more you're starting to see the season and the roadblocks and the bumps in the road that they thought might happen a year ago. And they did at times, don't get me wrong. But now I think it's happening even more so, and it has a lot more to do with what went into preparing for this upcoming season than I think people kind of realize. So I want to go to an interesting topic on the Flyers for this show because we're kind of getting to that critical part of the schedule here again. And we've passed one critical mark with Thanksgiving. And now we're getting closer to Christmas and closer to the end of the 2025 portion of the season. And if you checked the standings on Wednesday morning, this is what you would have seen. And note the Flyers' position here on this one. That is the Flyers in third place in the Metropolitan Division with 40 points and holding a playoff spot by 3 points. So we're getting to the point in the schedule, and obviously there's only a handful of games left. There's 9 games left for the Flyers before they're at halfway on the season. And we're getting to the point where the question needs to be asked, are the Flyers a good team? Are the Flyers potentially a playoff team? Because the morning of Wednesday, December 17th, says that they are. And there are some reasons to believe, and there are some reasons to be cautious. One of the reasons to be cautious is 2 columns over from the points on this one. It's the 10 regulation wins. You're not winning in a style that helps you break, one, be in a tiebreaker scenario, and 2, kind of indicates you're not winning many games convincingly. You know, you're having to use that extra time, go to the skills competition, use overtime just to escape with 2 points. And it always means that it's kind of an up for grabs situation. On the other hand, it's really hard to argue with the other numbers on here. They're at 40 points. The Islanders have 41. The Detroit Red Wings have 41 at the top of the Atlantic Division, and the Carolina Hurricanes have 44. Those are the only teams that are in front of you, technically, in the standings. And then you consider that Detroit and the Islanders have played 2 more games than the Flyers, which means that the Flyers' points percentage jumps into second place. And that it's hard to argue with that. Argue with the fact that they are very much on the cusp of being pretty much right at the top of the Metropolitan Division based on right now. This is where, to me, and we're going to start to get closer to, as we get closer to the show wrap and we look ahead and we do, all that, I want to bring some of those games into the conversation because they have 4 games left before the holiday break. They have 7 games left in the month of December. And I tend to find something in common with pretty much all of those games. There might be one that you can say is a little different in this respect. The Flyers are about to go play the Buffalo Sabres on Thursday night. Buffalo is the last place team in the Eastern Conference right now. They just fired their GM and made a GM change. The Flyers already beat them once this season, and convincingly. It certainly looks like a game that the Flyers have a good chance of gaining 2 points out of. Then the Flyers are going to go and play the New York Rangers. The Rangers have played 3 more games than the Flyers and have a 16-15-4 record. They are at 36 points, so 4 back of the Flyers. Points percentage is just barely over 500. And this is a road game for the Flyers. So it's a home game for the New York Rangers, who have a 4-10-3 record at Madison Square Garden this season. So, again, certain things about this matchup are in your favor. Then after that, the Flyers are going to have the one home game they have left for the rest of the month. It's against the Vancouver Canucks, who are last place in the league. And also just traded Quinn Hughes. And then they play Chicago, who is below 500 at 13-14-6, 32 points. So you're better than they are in the standings. And it was just announced fairly recently that Connor Bedard is out through the rest of the month. So you're going to play that game without Chicago having their best player. That makes 4 games right there where points are very much up for grabs. And when you come back from the holiday break and go on the West Coast and continue playing on the road, you're going to play Seattle first, who is 12-13-6 at 30 points, below 500, and actually has the fewest, is tied for the fewest number of regulation wins in the league. You're going to play Vancouver again, bottom of the league, And you're going to play Calgary, who is the next lowest team in the standings at 30 points and a 13, 17, and 4 record. And I get it. You could sit there and say, well, they've already lost to Calgary this season, so that doesn't matter. It doesn't. You're right. Any given night, anything can happen. But if this team wants to put themselves in a position to say, this is who we really are, look at the way the standings look. This is who we really are. If that's what they want to do, you go and have a very convincing, probably minimum of 5 wins over the next 7 to 8 games, I guess, is what I would consider. If I was including the Montreal game in that, which I was when I wrote the column for 97.3ESPN.com, 5 wins out of the 8 that were left in the month was kind of the goal. So they got one of them. I'll say 4 out of 7 for sure, probably at least gaining a point in one more. And if you can do better than that, then even better. If you do worse than that, I'm going to find it hard to latch onto the idea that you're going to be a playoff team down the road because you didn't take care of business in a game like in games like this against teams like this. You're completing your season series against Vancouver, bottom of the standings during this next stretch of games. You're playing Calgary again. Seattle is now toward the bottom. Chicago's without Bedard. The Rangers are not good on home ice. Everything. All of those factors. And when we do our next show, we'll be right up against the final game of the break or ahead of the break. And I wonder what we'll be able to say about the next 3-4 games to set the tone for that, and then see if the road trip that follows the holiday break does anything further with that. Because if you're not sure, if you're skeptical, if you're on the fence, if you're going to point out the regulation wins and the style of which they play and the decisions that they make sometimes and say, I don't agree with this, I'm putting the sign out on the lawn or doing whatever and saying, I don't want Rick Tocchet to be the coach, and I think this team is doomed and all stuff like that. And I'm going to tell you right now, if this turns into what I'm expecting it to, and again, out of 8 games, I was looking for 5 wins. They get one of them to start this thing off. So let's say 4 out of 7 going forward. If they can do that, I think it's hard to not be a believer of this team because they'll have gained enough points to put themselves in a good position. So there's a lot of positives going around the team right now. The Foerster news has kind of drug it down a little bit, but you're getting everything you're getting the opportunity right here. This is your opportunity to show that you are belonging with these other teams, that you are on the rise, that things are going the right way. It's easy. It may be easy to sit there and ignore, to say you're ignoring the potential pitfalls of this team, the areas where they're not going to be able to sustain this. Maybe it's crowd size. Maybe it's, that people aren't going to come down as much whenever this may be or that may be or whatever. Maybe it's you haven't played enough of those opponents yet that are going to challenge you like that. Maybe it's another injury that causes you to slip up and now, you're kind of coming back to reality like so many other teams are that have injuries hit. Whatever the case may be, you're going to chop off another 7 games. You're going to be 2 games shy of the halfway point of the season when the calendar turns. And if you are close enough to that halfway point that you are utilizing, minimal to, that you are putting yourself in that spot and getting closer and closer, to, utilizing the minimal home games you have, utilizing the opportunity that's in front of you, that will go a long way. So we will see. And as we do this, I guess we should, well, actually, first, before we do the look ahead, we will do the 3 stars of the week. So let's start there. We're going to do the Flyer Files 3 stars of the week. And we're going to start with the 3rd star of the week, and that is Dan Vladar, the goalie again, who continues to be extremely successful this year, put up great numbers. Little bit of an interesting record this week, 1-0-2. So he actually lost more games than he won. But look at the goals against and the save percentage: 193 goals against, 921 save percentage. Outstanding in the third period against Montreal to secure the win there. So he just continues to do it and make it look, easy with the consistency with which he's playing. It's worked out really well for him so far. It's worked out really well for the Flyers in signing him, to be honest. And that's where we'll start our 3 stars of the week. Star number 2 is a newcomer to this, Carl Grundstrom, who had a pretty successful week, all things considered. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, was a +3 on the week, and continuing to make an impact and continuing to do it kind of game over game. And I think it's a pleasant surprise. Like, I could have easily gone with a couple of other players who were putting up points, but you're used to what they have to offer. You're used to kind of also the inconsistency of which, this player's on a little bit of a hot streak, but next week he could be completely cold or something like that. Not saying that couldn't happen to Grundstrom, obviously, but Grundstrom, at least to me, has come in and been a real breath of fresh air for the team when you consider what they were trying to do in that time. You're trying to figure out where you're going to get, imagine if we would have talked about, whether, since the call up, he's got 3 goals over the last week, he's got 2. That could have easily been Tyson Foerster numbers, and that's why I'm saying it's not sustainable. I'm not saying that Grundstrom's going to replicate Foerster's scoring production, but it certainly helped you get by this week. It put you in a position, Grundstrom scores a game-tying goal twice during the course of this. His goal against San Jose actually proved to be the game winner. So again, you're breaking ties, or you're getting games into ties. You're helping the team directly earn points. I think it's been really impressive, and I think that he deserves the shout out for having a really strong week when it comes down to it. And finally, the first star of the week, and this is going to come as a surprise to no one because his name comes up just about every game. It's Trevor Zegras. Zegras with 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points over the course of the last week. And what more can you say about this guy? I mean, just about every night he's doing something to make an impact. He's up to 14 goals on the season. He's got 33 points in 32 games. He's doing everything you could have possibly asked for from an offensive standpoint. He's kind of turning things back to when people thought this guy was going to be a mainstay in the league and generate a lot of attention, both locally and nationally. And it seems like he's doing just that. So let's get into the look ahead. And this is where we kind of bridge that conversation about the schedule and the next 4 games into the break and what's to come and all of that. So here's how it's going to look going forward. Thursday night, the Flyers take on the Buffalo Sabres on the road. That game is at 7:30. Flyers will be on the road again to close out a 4-game trip against the New York Rangers on Saturday afternoon. That's at 12:30. Flyers home for the final time in 2025 on Monday at 7:30. They face the Vancouver Canucks that night, and then on the road quickly to face the Chicago Blackhawks. 9:00 start time on Tuesday, December 23rd, the last day of action before the league pauses for 3 days for the holiday break. The Flyers will have another day off in addition when they come back from that break before taking a trip out west to continue this road stretch and play a few more games. So that is the look ahead and the idea that this is, and there's that schedule for you. Playing a team like Buffalo that has a lot of question marks, that just made a management change, last in the Eastern Conference. Playing Vancouver coming up, last in the league. Playing Chicago, down Connor Bedard. Playing the Rangers with not such a good record at home and certainly out of the playoff picture. There's opportunity that awaits you then for points to be had. And if the Flyers can really do well on this stretch of games, we might be talking a lot more about what the near future holds more than thinking about the future in the distance. If the Flyers are going to emerge with a positive record like they've already had and continue to build on it. So it's going to just about do everything do it for everything with this show so far. Next episode, I want to bring that up because we're going to do a little bit of a change. The holiday schedule is a little complicated, obviously, as we get closer. So next week, instead of Wednesday, we're going to do Tuesday night. It's going to be a lead-in to that game against Chicago. So Tuesday night, 7:30. It'll be live just like this show is. And we will kind of get into the holidays at that point. We'll do a look ahead again on what's kind of coming after the holidays, but we'll also focus on what happened in the past week. A little bit of a mini preview of the Chicago game as we get ready to go into that break. And this way, it's just to also kind of, I'd love to keep it on Wednesday, but it clears out that day, as the holiday really hits. I certainly know that I would like to enjoy the 3-day break that they have from game action. Well, 4-day break for them, but the 3 days when the league completely takes off, it is the holidays. So we're going to bump this up a night and do this a little earlier just to be able to get ahead of it. And kind of spoiler alert here, it's going to be the same way the following week as we get closer to New Year's, just to bridge that gap and just navigate the holiday schedule that can be a little tricky sometimes beyond the sport, and go back to Wednesdays regularly in the new year. So that'll be when our next show is. And again, follow me at Kevin_Durso on Twitter X platform, on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Follow at 973 ESPN for any updates as well for my articles. Go 973ESPN.com to read all of that. So all of that factoring in. Follow BFA Live Sports and BFA Live Stream as well for not just Flyers Files and this show, but all of the possible shows that are out there that we have growing as we go through with this. It was a big, obviously busy stretch of time over the last couple of weeks for the Phillies. So the Now Batting for the Phillies podcast has gotten a lot of work over that time, as those conversations, Mike Gill, Bob Wankel, doing a great job breaking down the Phillies off season for you as we get closer to the new year. The Trust the Mike's podcast, not process, with Mike Gill and MKB, Sixers, in the middle of the season as well. So anything you need to know about the Sixers, you get from there. Earnshaw Radio with Nikki Earnshaw, who does a great job kind of covering all of the bases when it comes to his show. So all that to keep in mind. You can find it right here on BFA Live Sports and BFA Live Stream. And it's been an exciting couple of weeks for the Flyers as they continue to maintain pace in the standings, and we'll see where it goes going forward. But a busy week coming up for the Flyers. You know where to find me for everything else, and we look forward to being able to discuss even more when the next week rolls around, as we get closer to the holidays, closer to the end of 2025, the turning of the page to 2026, and a lot more to come. So thanks for tuning in to the Flyers Files podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Durso. We'll see you again next week, Tuesday night.